All right, so what we were doing last time, see if we can get it correct this time, is you've got this part for the long names list of what's here. And we said first thing is you've got to add in your name, and you got to add in a friend's name to the list. So you can just go back and, add, whatever your name is. If your name is Richard, we'll go with that one. Adding that to, we're also going to add another name to the list. Okay, so we're adding those to the students list here and there, and add in your friend SpongeBob to the list. Okay, if you do that, we go from having 13 names to now having 15 names on our list. Again, we can stretch the thing out for this one and do what we need to do. What we said was to figure out how long the names are on this thing. We're going to use the length of, again, this part that's here. So if you click on that one, it'll tell you that this thing is, Word or whatever. Using that for each item in the list that's here. So for each item in students, you're going to, so this one we need to make a variable. I think that's where we kind of got left off last time. That we want to change the sum by the length of each item in the list, so we just need to throw in that item that's there. And that way it should go back in and update every single value that's there. Now, if you're going to do this one a couple different times, you need to make sure that before you run this list that you actually set the sum back to 0, because if not, if you don't do that, it will actually keep adding the sum. So if the sum, if we don't put that sum back to 0, if we run this list the first time through, it tells us that all these names and letters comes out to be 91. If you do something to it and you don't have this thing reset back to 0, you run it again, now it's going to double that. Now we're back up to 182, which is not the correct value we're looking for. So just make sure that before you go back and add up this sum to figure out what it is, that you just set the sum equal to 0. And then for every item that's in the student's list, you're going to change that sum by the length of the next item that's there. And then we go from there. Okay, and then once you've got that, now you've got your sum. Easily find your average. Just do your sum divided by the length of the list that you have. Some people just put their name. They didn't put a friend's name on there. So some people's list may be 14, some are 15. Some people wanted to put more people's names on the list, so they wanted like 15 or some people I think had 17 or 18 names on the list, and that's fine. But then just go back and find your average. And to me, a really quick, easy one that if you're going to separate these, if you're going to check all these names, the long names on this thing to a list, because you're going to check to see that if the next name on the list is, longer than the average, you're going to add it to this long names list. But to me, this thing has got like an easy fix on this one to kind of do this one. That if you want to go ahead and kind of drop in this part of it, I would say that if the next, you're going to go back through and kind of check everything that's on there. So you basically kind of do your for each items list again. So we'll do this thing again. And for every item that's in the list, if, hang on, go back to our students here. Okay, so for every item that's in the student list that we have, if that item happens to be greater than the average, because we've got the sum here, I guess we need to go ahead and make an average. We'll call it average length or whatever. Again, you can just call it whatever, it doesn't really matter. Just something you'll know what it is when you make this thing. That after we figure out what the sum is, well, not there. Put it there. We want to set the average length to the sum divided by length of that list. There we go. Okay, so we'll pause from that. So there was our list. Again, we added a name or two to the list. And again, we've got to figure out the average. To get the average, we need the sum. So we set the sum to 0, and so for every item in students, we're going to change the sum by the length of that item, and then we'll do that for every single item that's in there. All right, once you've got the sum of every item in the list, and we've gone through and done this, you need an average, because again, we're going to compare everything to the average on this part of it. So we're going to set the average to the sum divided by the length of that student list. It already gave us that we're setting long names to a list. And now for every item that's in students, if that item happens to be greater than the average, then we want to add that item to long names list. Okay, and again, this is where I'd go back in and just make another one real quick. Let's do a short names. Because to me, this one's kind of screaming out to do the exact same thing. So if it's longer than the average, we're going to make it a long names list. Well, if that's the case, then we can just duplicate that one. So, all right, well, if it's not, then we're going to add that to not the long names list. We'll add it to a short names list. So now we've taken the original list of people we had, and we're going to separate it into a long names list and a short names list. All right, now, there's one small problem with the way we got it set up here. You may see what it is there at the end, the way we got it sitting at the moment. Because it's close, just not quite there. So. Because we're checking the item. We're checking, you know, all these names, Richard and SpongeBob and Daniel and Christopher and all these people. We're not checking the actual length, so I think this is one we need to check that length of the item. So I think we need to add in length of that item here. So if the length of the item is greater than the average length, then we're going to add that item to the long names list, because we still need to check to see how long it's going to be there. Okay. All right, the reason it's not working is we didn't say that short names was a list, so we need to set, before we do this one, we need to set short names to a list. Okay, because that's, there we go. So we set long names to list, and they do also the same thing for short names. So that's where the problems come in. Let's click it and see what happens now. All right, there we go. Now we can see our short names over here. There's our long names. All right, now we're in business. Okay, so we've got our 5 long names. We've got our 10 short names. Hang on, let's move it. Okay, so then we've got that part. Now we're good to go. Sorry, I had to get back off screen for a second. So now we can see everything is here, and now you can actually get everything else that you need to kind of go through on that one to get all the other parts and pieces working. So again, the problem on that one was at the end, the glitch we had was that we didn't set the short names to a list, so we had to go back in and set that short names to a list there. Sure. Okay. Now, there may be a couple other little details that you need to do on that one, but there's your basic setup on that one. So the other little things they ask you to do, you should be able to kind of get stuff figured out from there. If not, then you can come back and talk to me, one-on-one, and we'll get that figured out of what's happening there.